Federalist 75, Part 3. We'll start with paragraph 5 here in a minute. I'm going to introduce you to a few other books that will be very interesting for you to read if you have a chance. And if you want to look at the founding era a little bit more in depth and understand the Federalist Papers a little better. This book is called The First American Constitutions, and the subtitle is Republican Ideology and the Making of the State Constitutions in the Revolutionary Era. It focuses on the state constitutional making, and it'll give you some facts that will be really helpful for you to understand what was going on in those 11 years after the Revolution, after the Declaration of Independence. And this book is in German translated. It's by Willi Paul Adams, W-I-L-L-I, Paul Adams. And it's a really good book. I have already mentioned this book. I just didn't have the book with me. Saving the Revolution. It's a collection of essays. It's really good. Take a look at it. It's edited by Charles Kessler, K-E-S-L-E-R. And the subtitle is The Federalist Papers and the American Founding. It's published by the Free Press. And here's another one. It's co-edited by Michael Allen Gillespie and Michael Linish. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that last name right, but it's called Ratifying the Constitution. It covers the Constitution, ratification of the Constitution in the 13 states. It's a series of essays. This will complement the other work that I've shown you by Pauline Maier, Ratification. So just wanted you to keep these in mind as we go forward, that all these books are available to you if you want to become familiar with them and just kind of study the Federalist Papers a little bit more in depth. After you go through the 85 papers, and if you feel like your command of the English language is getting better, or at a point where you're at a upper intermediate level, so I think it would be a good time to study these books at that time. So let me just go ahead and read paragraph 5 and 6 and 7. The remarks made in a former number, which has been alluded to in another part of this paper, will apply with conclusive force against the admission of the House of Representatives to a share in the formation of treaties. The fluctuating and taking its future increase into the account, the multitudinous composition of that body forbid us to expect in it those qualities which are essential to the proper execution of such a trust. Remember, I told you in part 1 of this Federalist, they thought that the number of representatives in the House of Representatives, which will be going up for election every 2 years, is just too many to give it stability. And he says fluctuation is something that's not stable, it fluctuates. And they hated anything that would not give stability to the government. So he says, the House of Representatives, let's just count it out of this treaty-making power. Accurate and comprehensive knowledge of foreign politics, a steady and systematic adherence to the same views, a nice and uniform sensibility to national character, decision, secrecy, and dispatch are incompatible with the genius of a body so variable and so numerous. So there's all these important things that we need: secrecy, quick reactions, quick decision making. You can't expect that from such a body with so many people in it. The very complication of the business by introducing a necessity of the concurrence of so many different bodies would of itself afford a solid objection. The great frequency of the calls upon the House of Representatives, in other words, them going up members going up for re-election every 2 years. And the greater length of time which it would often be necessary to keep them together when convened to obtain their sanction in the progressive stages of a treaty would be source of so great inconvenience and expense as alone ought to condemn the project. So it's inconvenient, it's going to cost a lot, it's difficult to get all of these people together. So let's not even think about getting the House involved. The next paragraph, the only objection which remains to be canvassed is that which would substitute the proportion of 2/3 of all the members composing the senatorial body to that of the 2/3 of the members present. So this is one of the other criticisms that they had. They said, why do you say only 2/3 of the senators present to concur, rather than saying 2/3 of all the senators that are serving in office in the Senate? He says, it has been shown under the second head of our inquiries that all provisions which require more than the majority of any body to its resolutions have a direct tendency to embarrass the operations of the government and an indirect one to subject the sense of the majority to that of the minority. This consideration seems sufficient to determine our opinion that the convention have gone as far in the endeavor to secure the advantages of numbers in the formation of treaties as could have been reconciled either with the activity of the public councils or with a reasonable regard to the major sense of the community. If 2/3 of the whole number of members had been required, it would in many cases, from the non-attendance of a part, amount in practice to a necessity of unanimity. And the history of every political establishment in which this principle has prevailed is a history of impotence, perplexity, and disorder. Proofs of this position might be adduced from the examples of the Roman tribuneship, the Polish Diet, and the States General of the Netherlands. Did not an example at home render foreign precedents unnecessary? So he says, for those who say 2/3 of all the Senate, members of all the Senate should be present, in a way you're giving veto power to every one of those members. When you say that, any senator from any state might choose not to show up and the whole deal is gone back. You can't make a treaty. So because of that, we said 2/3 present. And majority of senators who think this is important, they'll show up. But if you say 2/3 of all, then you've really kept the working of the government hostage to one or two senators. He says, look at what happened in Rome. They gave authority to tribunes, but whenever a Caesar took over, they just totally pushed the tribunes out of the way. The Polish Diet, all these Polish principalities and princes, they had veto power, and they couldn't decide on anything, and they became always stronger powers around them would conquer and divide Poland over and over again, because again, they were hostages to one or two princes. And it says we've learned the same thing from Netherlands, we've learned the same thing at home with our first constitution. Since everything important had to be ratified, or every treaty or every amendment to the Constitution had to be unanimously accepted, he said we couldn't do anything. That's why we gave you this new Constitution. And the last paragraph, to require a fixed proportion of the whole body would not, in all probability, contribute to the advantages of a numerous agency, better than merely to require a proportion of the attending members. The former, by increasing the difficulty of resolutions disagreeable to the minority, diminishes the motives to punctual attendance. the latter by making the capacity of the body to depend on a proportion which may be varied by the absence or presence of a single member, has the contrary effect. And as by promoting punctuality, it tends to keep the body complete, there is a great likelihood that its resolutions would generally be dictated by as great a number in this case as in the other. While there would be much fewer occasions of delay, it ought not to be forgotten that under the existing confederation, 2 members may and usually do represent the state, whence it happens that Congress, who now are solely invested with all the powers of the Union, rarely consists of a greater number of persons than would compose the intended Senate. If we add to this that as the members vote by states, and that where there is only a single member present from a state, his vote is lost, it will justify a supposition that the active voices in the Senate, where the members are to vote individually, would rarely fall short in number of active voices in the existing Congress. When in addition to these considerations we take into view the cooperation of the President, we shall not hesitate to infer that the people of America would have greater security against an improper use of power of making treaties under the new Constitution than they now enjoy under the Confederation. And when we proceed still one step further and look forward to the probable augmentation of the Senate by the erection of the new estates, we shall not only perceive ample ground of confidence in the sufficiency of the numbers to whose agency that power will be entrusted, but we shall probably be led to conclude that a body more numerous than the Senate would be very little fit for the proper discharge of the trust. So we're going to have new states join the Union, more senators will be in the Senate, and you'll have less to worry about. And he says, look at our experience. What happened under the Confederation, under our first Constitution? Any 1 or 2 states could stop things from happening. We don't want that in this new Constitution.